To begin, come up to stand. And if you can do so with your eyes closed, then do. And take a few moments to observe yourself in standing. Notice what you're feeling. And then open your eyes softly and walk around the space a little bit. Notice your environment. And then notice yourself again. And you can kind of play with this idea a little bit of letting yourself kind of go outward and take in what's around you. And then see if you can be walking slowly, but to go inward and to kind of take in what's happening internally. And then let it go and find your spot on the floor and come lay down on your back. If it's uncomfortable at all for your back to have your legs long, then you can keep your knees bent and your feet standing. And otherwise, you have your legs long, you have your arms down by your sides. If it's comfortable, close your eyes. If you're in a place that has walls, you might sense where you are and where the closest wall is, where the farther wall is, and see what else about your immediate environment you can sense. And then turn your attention inward and notice the way that you're laying on the floor. And notice where you go. Notice what inside yourself takes your attention. What do you observe about how you're breathing right now? Does your breathing have any kind of effect on the feeling of laying on the floor? Does anything change at the top of your inhale or the bottom of your exhale, the pressure that you feel along the back of you? And you can play with it a little bit. You can do a little research. You could, I don't know, maybe exaggerate something about how you're breathing. Just feel around and see if anything changes. And maybe it doesn't. You're just listening, just checking. And then go meta for a second and observe yourself in this situation. Notice how your thinking is, and notice how much activity in your brain might want to take you out of this circumstance. And you can consider that your brain really does what it's programmed to do. And whether you mean to or not, you're constantly reprogramming your own brain. So a big part of what we do in the Feldenkrais method is create these opportunities to use our brains differently. And that has a very interesting effect on our nervous system. Now bring your attention to your torso. And then notice your two arms. Are your arms somehow part of the way that you feel your torso, or are they something separate? And then how do your shoulders fit into the picture? Are your shoulders part of your arms, or are your shoulders part of your torso? And then what about your neck and your head? Does your head somehow feel like it's part of your torso, or is it in a completely different department? And this is where you start to get an image of yourself, a sensory image of yourself. There is in no way the right way to see yourself. And it changes. It'll change throughout this lesson. So for now, you're just starting to refine your ability to notice. Now consider your pelvis. What is included when you feel your hips? Does that include some part of your back? Or does it not? Does your pelvis include your belly? And how about your legs, your thighs, your groin, even your genitals? Is that part of your pelvis? And then notice your two legs and feel from your heel, your knee, up your leg. What part of you is leg? And where's the border? And it's a game. We're just playing a little neurological game. Because of course, your parts are a continuum, right? But we learn to define ourselves in a very specific way. And sometimes that definition is extremely helpful for certain functions and activities. And sometimes it can be extremely detrimental. It can create a lot of complications in our movements and in our behavior, but sometimes even in our thinking and how we feel about ourselves. All right, now let that all go and bend your knees and bring your feet to stand. Notice how the pressure changes on the back of you. And now bring your attention to your spine. It goes from your tailbone. Your sacrum is the bone on the back of your pelvis, kind of at the crack of your butt area. And then you have the small of your back, that bottom part of your spine. Then your spine gets very interesting because it has a series of ribs connected to it in the back. So sense where that is for you, the bottom of your rib cage spine, the top of your rib cage spine. Where is that? Where's the top rib in the back? And then where does it become pure neck, unadulterated by ribs? And then where does your spine connect to your skull? And then feel how your 2 feet are touching the floor. And start doing a very, very gentle movement of pressing your 2 feet into the floor and then letting that go. See if you can sense that movement traveling up your spine. Does that pressure of your feet going down in the floor, does it reach your head? Do you feel any kind of little changing or moving at the level of your head? And then deepen the pressure a little bit right down into your heels, right? Kind of into the middle of your heel. Push it into the floor and maybe slightly away from you, but still just slight. And I can see for some of you that when you're pressing into your heels, your low back is going more toward the floor. Some of you, that's not happening so much. But notice that you could create that movement. And this is something that we do a lot in Feldenkrais, especially on a beginner level. What we would do would be press into our feet and feel how our low back goes more into the floor. So you can try that and see if you can create that. And so in a way, it's like there's a transmission of force that goes from your feet into your knees, and then somehow from your knees into your back. Now, try to do the opposite, but still with the same movement. How do you use your feet? By pressing, and it might be more like a hugging inward or pushing outward, you see, but do something with your feet so that your low back comes a bit away from the floor. And then start to go back and forth. You do something with your feet and your low back kind of comes away from the floor. And then you change your feet a bit and your low back goes a bit down to the floor. Now let that go, slide your legs down long and take a rest, which for you guys that are new to this practice, obviously it is not because we're having a vigorous workout for our muscles, but because we are having somewhat of a vigorous workout for our brain. Now listen, as you're laying there, I want to further define this image, okay? So you have the line of your spine, but now picture a line that goes from the back of your right heel, up the back of your right knee, into your pelvis, into the joint. Now, somewhere at the bottom of your pelvis, you have a little cup. And at the top of the bone of your thigh, you have a little ball. The bone of your thigh goes from your knee into your hip, but at the level of your hip, it deviates a little over to the left. So your thigh bone on the right goes from your knee into your hip, but then it has like a little shaft that goes over to the left. And then the ball of the joint, the ball at the very top of your thigh bone, is what connects to your pelvis. And then on your own, see if you can imagine where your left hip joint is relative to the line of your left leg. No perfect science, just an image. Now, weirdly enough, your two hip joints are very deep into your body, 5 or 6 inches deep. And weirdly enough, your hip joints are also quite narrow, really just about the width of your face. So now see if you can get this image of your hip joints, the width of, let's say, the outer border of your eyes, right down there at the very bottom of your pelvis. Now stand your feet again. And this time when you press into your 2 feet, lift the front of your foot and just press into your heels and try to feel/imagine how your thigh bones connect into the little joints, into the little sockets somewhere mysteriously in the bottom back of your pelvis. Now, for some of you that this is new, this is the kind of stuff that might be a bit lost on you, right? You might not really have a visual image or a context to put this in, so it might just be kind of murky, right? So for those of you that have a reference or a visual association for your hip joints, then maybe you can also get a sense of when you're pressing into your 2 feet, your hip joints are lifting a little bit toward the ceiling, aren't they? They're tilting back and lifting up a little bit toward the ceiling. It's almost like your thigh bones are lifting your hip joints. So if you're feeling that your hip joints are somewhere around where you put your hands on your hips, when someone says put your hands on your hips, change your perspective a little bit and really start to think about the bottom of your pelvis, your pelvic floor, and your hip joints are remarkably close to your pelvic floor between your pubic bone and your tailbone. Change how you're pressing your feet so that your hip joints go down toward the floor and back, down toward the floor and back. And in that way, your tailbone will also go a bit down toward the floor, kind of like down and into the floor. So in one situation, your 2 hip joints get kind of lifted a bit toward the ceiling. And in one situation, you kind of poke into your hip joints and they go back and down toward the floor. Again, if this is totally lost on you, just let it go and just keep feeling the difference of your low back going toward the floor, your low back going away from the floor. It's very important in your sensory self-image to start to know the difference between the top of your pelvis, which is mainly involved in stability, and the bottom of your pelvis, which is mainly involved in mobility. Okay, let it go. Bring your legs down long, rinse your brain. If you're uncomfortable in your back, you can always rest on your side, right? Do whatever you got to do to be comfortable so that you can pay attention. For you guys that are listening, that are new, generally when you do a beginner's Feldenkrais lesson, we don't do a lot of detail like this. You know, it's heavy lifting. Even for you guys that do Feldenkrais, details can be a lot to pay attention to, right? So you just keep coming back to where you are. You listen when you can, you drift off when you need to. Promise, as long as you're listening to yourself, you're still doing what we're really about, which is just noticing. But we're going to keep unraveling this. So stand your feet again. Think about your tailbone. So as you're pushing and pulling your feet, you want your tailbone to be slightly lifted away from the floor and your tailbone to be pulled down a little bit into the floor. And notice your head now. Is anything changing about the position of your head? See if you can do what you're doing, but do it lighter and quicker. Try not to tighten your back or your belly or your face or your breathing. Try to find a really light, delicate movement, hopefully a pleasurable movement. Pushing and pulling into your feet so that your hip joints change their position and your tailbone changes its position. Some of you might feel that your head nods a little bit as a result of what you're doing with your feet and the bottom of your pelvis. Okay, now pause with that, but keep your feet standing and bring your attention back to your breathing. Now bring your two arms up to the ceiling and bring your hands to touch like you're praying. And more or less have your two arms in front of your chest. Check the position of your feet and your knees and your pelvis. And notice that if your knees are together or if your knees are wider than your ankles, that the way you're able to transmit a force through your feet will be different. So try it out. Keep your arms as they are, keep your feet as they are, but bring your knees together. Now continue as you have been doing of tilting your hip joints back and forward. Press your feet and let your tailbone come a bit away from the floor. Drag your feet and let your tailbone come down a little bit toward the floor. You just notice how that feels. And then reposition yourself so that your feet are close together, but your knees are apart. And then see how it is to do this pushing and pulling of your feet and the tilting of the bottom of your pelvis. Keep your feet on the floor, but have your knees wider than your feet. Now try it so that your feet and your knees and your pelvis are all more or less equidistant. And then continue doing the tilting of the bottom of your pelvis using your feet. And then again, start to play with the speed and see if you can kind of find this like pop, 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 like a light, quick. Try to let your abdomen be free. You got to try to let your chest and your throat be free. And you got to try to find the movement from your feet instead of the places that are probably more familiar for you. Now take a rest for a moment. You can bring your legs down too. And then come back with your feet standing and your arms straight, your fingertips toward the ceiling. Knees are the same width as your feet. Now try to do this. Keep your arms as they are, your hands as they are, but it's like a triangle, right? A long skinny triangle between your hands and your arms and your chest. So bring your triangle a little bit over to the right and then come back. Your hands stay together, your arms stay straight. And you try not to use the force of your back and your abdomen and the familiar places to move from. Some of you are turning your head to the right. That can help you to bring your arms to the right. Try not to do it really well. Try to just find a way to do it that feels pretty smooth for you. If there's any reason that your arms can't be up like that, that's just not comfortable for your neck, shoulders, whatever. You could do this with your arms hugged over your chest instead. Okay, now try bringing your arms to the left and coming back. Right, you don't have to go very far. Try not to tighten your abdomen. Try not to tighten your chest. Try to just be sloppy and floppy about it. Maybe you just bring your arms over a centimeter. How's that? Now rest your arms for a second. Bring your attention back to your feet. What I want you to do is tighten your abdomen like you're going to lift something heavy. And keep your abdomen tight and go back to the tilting of the bottom of your pelvis. Use your feet still and just feel how that is. Yeah, try it fast, light and quick. Your belly stays tight and you're trying to move the bottom of your pelvis in a very gentle, light, quick way. Now try the opposite. Now push your belly forward like a little balloon and keep it pressed forward. And then continue with the tilting of the bottom of your pelvis. Yeah, and notice how that is. Now, if you can, don't do anything weird with your belly at all. Bring your hands back up to that position, palms together, arms straight. Try to not push your belly out or pull your belly in. You're going to slowly bring your triangle to the right and come back many times as you're tilting the bottom of your pelvis forward and back continuously. So all of you got to start slow. Slow it down first. And you feel how it is to slowly bring your triangle to the right and come back while maintaining the rhythm of tilting the bottom of your pelvis forward and back. Don't tighten your belly. Don't push your belly forward. Right? So manage your ambition. Notice the degree of strain, right? You got to really check on yourself. If you find you're pushing or pulling or trying hard to get somewhere, those are the times for you to take a break until you get back to that kind of dreamy place of just feeling and being. And then you come back and you see if you can play with it again. Tilt your pelvis 3 or 4 times forward and back as you're bringing your triangle to the right. And tilt your pelvis 3 or 4 times as you're bringing your triangle back home. Arm movement is slow, and gradually the pelvis movement is light and quick. Okay, rest your arms if you're not resting already. Notice how your 2 shoulders feel against the floor. Bring your arms back up with your palms together. Slowly bringing your arms to the left and coming back. And maybe you start slow with the pelvis, and then maybe you do it quick. And you find the way that works for you. Maybe going quick is just like totally impossible. So then you find what works for you. Even if it's not a particularly satisfying movement or satisfyingly large movement, right? It's coming from your feet. Right? And you can giggle about it. It's kind of ridiculous what you're doing, right? It's also ridiculous how hard it is. Find what's easy for you. Good. Take a rest, bring your arms down, bring your legs down. This time, stand your feet and cross your left knee over your right knee. Keep your arms resting comfortably. And now use your right heel and ankle to tilt the bottom of your pelvis. So your hip joints come up, and then to press or pull through your right foot so that your hip joints go back and down into the floor. Again, if your hip joints is a bit too ambiguous for you at this point, just keep track of your tailbone. How do you use your right foot so that your tailbone looks a little bit more toward the ceiling, and then somehow it looks a little bit more down into the floor? Just using your right foot. Your left knee is over your right knee. Maintain your personal rhythm for the tilting, and slowly bring both of your legs to the left and come back. Your left knee is over your right knee. You're tilting your pelvis forward and back. Start slow, and then maybe later you do it quick. Without tightening your belly, without tightening your back, without clenching your teeth or holding in your mouth, breathing comfortably. Just having an experience of noticing. And if you don't like it or you're tired, then you rest. Okay. And if you're not resting already, then take a rest. You can have your feet standing, have your legs long. Sense the way that you're making contact with the floor, whatever position you're in. And see if anything's a little bit different, anything changing. And then again, continue at your own time, right? Rest as long as you need. When you feel ready, you'll come back and have your 2 feet standing, and then you'll have your right knee over your left knee. And with your legs crossed like that, you'll be tilting your 2 legs to the right and coming back, while maintaining your own personal rhythm of tipping or tilting the bottom of your pelvis forward and back. Tailbone toward the floor, away from the floor, toward the floor, away from the floor, toward the floor, away from the floor, as your 2 legs go to the right and come back. Feel your left foot. Your left foot is generating the movement. Come back to the middle and cross your legs, lengthen your legs down, take a rest. As you're resting, notice your torso. The way that you see or feel your torso. And then notice your pelvis, and notice the way that you see and feel your pelvis. Notice your 2 legs, where they begin, where they end. Notice your 2 arms and shoulders, your neck and your head. And then one more time, stand your 2 feet, except this time you're going to bring the bottoms of your feet to touch. You start with your 2 feet standing, and then you bring the bottoms of your feet to touch. And you try to not hang or drop your knees down, but you also try not to hold your knees up. You kind of find the sweet spot where the bottoms of your feet are touching. So your ankles have to be bent in an interesting way, but you're not just falling into your flexibility, especially if you're super flexible. And you're also not holding your legs rigidly. And then what you're going to start playing with is having your legs in this position. How do you again push and pull with your feet to tilt your tailbone a little bit toward the ceiling, a little bit toward the floor, and start slowly. And if you can feel your thigh bones and your hip joints, you might get a sense that in some way it's almost like a narrowing of your hip joints toward each other and a widening of your hip joints away from each other. And you're using your feet. Notice your head. What changes about the position of your head? Try it light and quick, without more effort. Stand your feet and just go back to the original movement, which was pressing your 2 feet lightly into the floor and noticing how that travels up your body, up to your head. And is anything different about it now? And then let it all go. Bring your legs down, bring your arms down, and reconnect to the sense of support that you're getting from the floor. Notice how you're feeling and take a rest. And now take about 5 minutes to yourself before re-engaging with life, if you can. You might want to rest a while longer. And at some point, when you're ready to get up, take a little time to notice yourself again in standing and to notice yourself again in walking like you did at the beginning of the lesson. And just see if there's any influence of this process on how you feel once you're upright and moving around. You try to just stay with yourself for another 5 minutes, however it's meaningful to you.